longer than last year's did, which means that at least two Democratic faces are going to be a lot more familiar to you by the end of this year than they were at the end of last, possibly. We're going to hear from them now. They are in our Washington studio. They're Congressman James Jones of Oklahoma, who's the chairman of the House Budget Committee, and Senator Ernest Hollings of South Carolina, who's the senior Democrat on the Senate Budget Committee. They're in our Washington studio with Jane Bryant Quinn and Phil Jones. Phil.
Good morning, Diane. Good morning, gentlemen. Just a few days ago, Mr. Jones, I was walking around the Capitol corridors, and I saw two gentlemen going down the hall. One was Jim Jones, chairman of the Budget Committee in the House side, a Democrat, and the other one was Senator Peter Domenici, a Republican. And Senator Domenici had his arm around your shoulder. My question is, have you folks decided that this is all a farce, this Reagan budget, and you're going to do what you want to do?
Well, I've said from the very beginning that the problems this year are so much bigger than they were last year, and the solutions are so much more difficult, that if we're going to come to grips with the economic mess, we're going to have to do it on a bipartisan basis. I would hope that as the year progresses, that Democrats and Republicans alike will get together and take on the tough solutions that are necessary.
Well, are you in agreement with Senator Domenici?
We're not in agreement yet, but we're going to continue talking about it. As far as your question about whether it's a farce, the budget is unreal in many aspects. I think the deficit is larger than stated in the budget. It's not as fair as I would like as far as where the sacrifices are called for. But through this period of time, in the next few weeks and months, I hope we can all get together and do what's right for the country.
Gentlemen, you're both Democrats, and as I'm sure you know, the Democrats have not had much credibility lately on the subject of balancing the budget. How can you expect people to accept a Democratic alternative when they have your party identified with a big spending and a big deficit party?
Well, I think this is the opportunity for the Democratic Party. The truth is, the last time we balanced the budget was under Lyndon Johnson in 68-69, so that's been the last one, a Democratic balanced budget. The fact is now with this opportunity is we can more or less approach this by a reenactment of the present budget, namely not give these large increases in defense, large increases in entitlements, large increases in tax spending, some $40 billion. We can pick up $100 to $105 billion and begin to face up to the $150 billion problem. The trouble with the Reagan approach is that he gives a $50 billion solution for a $150 billion problem, and that just leaves us all wrangling with no real solution.
Well, let me also add that we did have an alternative in the House last year that the Democrats proposed, and had it passed, I think it's fair to say that the deficit would be below $50 billion rather than in excess of $100 billion, and that there'd be 1 million more people working, and interest rates wouldn't be at the level that they are now.
But you weren't able to put it together last year. Why do you think you could put it together this year when you couldn't last year?
Well, I think last year, with the new administration coming in, there was a different political climate. The president was enormously successful at selling his program, and the mechanics of the way it was presented gave an advantage to the administration's program. This year, as I said, the economic mess is greater than it was last year, and I think Democrats and Republicans alike are wanting to search for some real answers now.
You're talking about the president's popularity the last time. One thing that is really concerning the White House is whether or not this economic mess sooner or later gets pinned on Ronald Reagan personally. Senator Hollings, do you think it has reached that point?
Not quite yet. He's very good, and the trouble is coming through now to the people. There are more bankruptcies and everything else of that kind, and they don't see any real solution or thawing of this economy. The trouble is that the tax cut was far, far too extravagant. It's guaranteeing these high interest rates, and we as Democrats on the Senate side also had a solution of delaying these individual tax cuts across the board until we could afford them. So we would like to withhold now and solve the deficit problem, get the interest rates down, and then Democrats, Republicans can all have a big party and cut all the taxes. We don't mind that.
Well, everybody's talking about getting interest rates down. Both sides would like to do that. But yet, Mr. Jones, you were suggesting over the weekend that both parties are in a state of paralysis. To both of you, where is the consensus? What are you going to be able to agree to?
Well, I would continue again with the present budget that was just signed by President Reagan into law less than 7 weeks ago in December. If we can start at that particular point like any governor would do, like any labor union, this is the private sector right now. They're all having to freeze their benefits. The airline workers taking a 10% cut. If we can start out with that kind of attitude, we can immediately save some $100 billion and begin to talk sense.
Freeze everything in the government right
Yeah,
now.
well, freeze the budget right now, that's right. And if you do that, then you begin to see that something realistic will develop as a solution to the problem. But it's such a mammoth problem of $150 billion facing you. You got a $109 billion deficit this year. You got another 150 coming after you. This is what's got Wall Street and all the business community afraid to invest. High interest rates.
Very clearly, the large and continuous deficits are going to just keep long-term borrowing dead, and it will keep interest rates high. Out of conversations like this, what Senator Hollings recommends, I think we will reach a consensus. Obviously, we're going to have to cut spending and the growth of spending, but we're also going to have to pay for whatever the essential elements of government are. Either the next generation of Americans will be taking up that debt, or we're going to pay for it ourselves. And so we're going to have to raise revenues and cut spending, and there's no magic solution other than that.
It's been suggested, however, this being an election year, that nobody is really going to be able to approach this problem until elections are over, that the Republicans won't be able to vote for the big deficits, and that the Democrats certainly aren't going to support the president, so nothing is going to happen. Everyone puts his head in the sand until after the election. Do you think that's likely?
That's a possibility. That's the probability, really. But this particular approach, reenacting, in a sense, the 82 budget that we now have, does not increase the taxes and does not cut any spending. Now, I believe we can do some spending cuts, but I mean, if you start off with that agreement in your minds, you can come forward with a real solution to this thing, and this is what any state governor would do in 10 minutes. He cannot print money, and if you were Governor Reagan instead of President Reagan, you'd fix it in place the budget you have, rather than these $33 billion increases in defense and $40 billion in tax spending that you got to go out and borrow at 14.5% to send that money back to the people.
I personally think that if this economy continues to deteriorate, statesmanship will come to the fore in the Congress. Otherwise, I think everyone in both political parties who ignore the problem will be in jeopardy this election year.
And on that serious note, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil, Jane, gentlemen. And this time we